Hi and welcome back. We're now on episode 6 of Watercolour for Beginners, and you will be glad to know that next episode we will be starting some actual projects. We'll be done with just basic watercolour exercises, but I hope you've enjoyed it so far because they're so important to get you confident with the brush and the paint. So for our last beginners episode today, we're going to be doing blending and layering. So get your paints and paper and we'll make a start. Okay, so we're going to look at a really simple colour blend to start off, and it's quite well demonstrated on my colour wheel that I painted here, where you've got a really nice smooth blend on the whole of the colours going from strong to really translucent. And I know we did that with our circles of colour in episode 2, but this is more when we're wanting to paint like a sunset or, you know, a bigger broad range of colour. And then of course how we introduce a second colour in, so we've actually got a colour blend. Now I've just marked out 2 little squares here using washi tape. Washi tape's just a little bit less intensely sticky than masking tape, so it's really fantastic to use. I used mine with my watercolour sploshes on, of course. And the colours I'm using today are Permanent Rose and Sap Green. I'm using tubes and I'm using professional artist quality, which is what I tend to use on a regular basis because I think that's a really nice quality paint to be showing off these techniques with. And I'm using a size 8 Pro Art brush, as usual, nice and large, and we're going to get our water on the brush and we're going to wake up our paint. So here we go. To start off with, I'm going to show you how to do a gradient wash, just like I was showing you there. So we start with a wet colour, but it's going to be fairly concentrate on the brush, but it is wet. So we've woken up our colour with the brush. And I'm just going to do a horizontal sweep of colour, and there's quite a lot there, but I'm just going to fill in the top. Okay, but the whole aim with doing a smooth graded wash is to not do too many brush strokes and also not have too much water on your brush. I know that sounds a bit strange, but what we want is for a smooth transition down the page. We don't want to overload this wash with too much water, otherwise it will lead to puddles of water coming down the page. So I'm blotting off my brush each time I put it back into the water jar, but essentially what I'm doing is I'm cleaning off my brush each time to just get that paint off it, and then blotting it down and then just bringing that colour down. And it's funny because it looks like in the first inch all the colour has disappeared, but actually no, you'd be surprised that the colour is travelling down on its merry way down the page, but just very gently and slowly. And we'll see when we take the masking tape off at the end that there will actually be the palest of pinks there, but you just get a lovely smooth transition down. Now, to work with 2 colours, it can be a good idea to get a second jar of water into play. There we go, a clean one, either a clean one that you always put your painty brush in there and then pick up a bit more water that's clean to pop on the page there, or you might want to allocate 1 per colour depending on how you like to do it. So let's go again. So same technique, wet but fairly concentrate amount of paint. Now just bringing it down, but with a brush that is not overloaded with water. So now let's clean that brush off. Let's move these guys over there a sec. There we go. Thank you very much. And now just coaxing the pink colour down the page with just a little bit of water on the brush each time. Nice. And you've got to work fairly swiftly when you're dealing with washes and blends, because of course it's all about making sure that these colours meet each other whilst they're still wet. So we've got a really concentrated amount of green there on the page, almost dry. So let's get the brush nice and wet and clean and dab it off a little bit and start this journey of the green coming up to meet the pink. This reminds me of nougat, or I think there's another like coconut ice or something. There's some kind of colour that pink is really reminding me of. Okay, so I'm gradually drawing that colour up. Great, there we go. Oh, I may have just put a little bit too much water on there. I didn't blot it off enough. So I'm just going to start that process again, coming up to keep a nice smooth transition. And with a wet brush once more. Okay, here the two shall meet. And hopefully we haven't left it too long. We get a lovely smooth transition. There we go, so a lovely blend of the green into the pink. So we're going to let that dry and see what it looks like at the end. But now I'm just going to go grab my other watercolour pad. We're going to look at layering and colour blending. So let's have a little rejig. Let's pop that in the space. And here's one I prepared earlier. So the pink and green, as we already know, can give us a number of different tones, but it also can offer us some options for layering and blending. So the gradient blend that you just saw there was a very sort of polite, sort of straight-lined blend, not that exciting, but I want to show you a fun little exercise on this side of the page that's going to complement what we do on that side of the page. So we're going to look at blending once more, and I'm going to paint a polo mint circle. Where have we seen that before? If anyone who's been watching from the beginning, that's right. So we're doing a wet on dry circle. Now I'm going to clean my brush off, but I'm going to keep my brush really nice and wet here, and I'm going to paint a watery circle that just kisses the edge. Oh, look at that, and overlaps. And just watch that colour running into that circle. And that's fine, that's the same colour blending in. We've done this before, we know what happens if we add another one in. It sort of gets gradually paler and paler. Fine, but what happens when we add another colour in? So let's get our green into play now. So I'm going to pop a bit of green. Oh, it's not quite touching. Let's get it touching. There we go. So that first circle was quite concentrate, and this green is quite concentrate. They're basically fighting each other. There's not a particularly lovely, harmonious blend going on. Let's try this circle, shall we? There's slightly more delicate green. Aha, something might be happening. Ooh, now that's amazing. And if I started really mixing these two together, this would end up in a sludgy brown mess. But instead, we've got a fun little colour blend going on. Just going to get into my pink water here because I've just noticed that that little bit didn't fill in. Right, let's have some fun then, shall we? I'm going to get a bit of strong pink and just see what happens when we put a nice bit of concentrated pink onto a very watery circle and we get a lovely little blend. And then, so this little exercise is just a fun play around with what happens when you put two colours together of differing concentrations and you see which one dominates the other, which one pushes into the other one. And you could just keep going, to be honest. I really think this is one of the prime examples of how relaxing watercolour can be by just painting circles and watching them blend into each other. And the coolest thing is, whilst I've been focusing on down here, up here we've had a little sort of invasion of the pink, it looks like, which is kind of fun. So I'm going to just paint one or two more, and I'd love to see how you get on with this because I just think it's a really, really fun little mixture. And then also what happens as these colours gradually mix further and further together, you start to get different tones. With this pink and green mixing together, you're starting to get a sort of, I don't know, a sort of, it's an earthy pink, but I quite like it. And let's do one more watery circle here. Fun times. And one more really strong pink circle in there. Oh, and that is ever so satisfying to watch. Okay, so that is a really fun exercise all about blending and seeing the different concentrations of paint and how they sort of negotiate their way with the water. Over here, we've got something a little bit different. So what I'm going to try out here is layering. So these are bone dry. These have been completely dried out. And we're now going to see what happens when you add a layer on top of them. Now, when you are layering in watercolour, because watercolour is a delicate medium, you always want to start with a light or translucent layer first. Otherwise, your paint would struggle to create a layer over the top of it that might be seen. So that, for example, this is a nice translucent pink. So I could paint another fairly translucent pink layer over the top of it, and the layer over the top would be fine. It's showing up really nicely, but the layer underneath also, you can see that lovely crisp line, and that's one of my favourite techniques with creating petals and sort of eucalyptus leaves, even though they're not translucent. Just you wait till, well, if you've got the book, you'll know that project really well. Now let's have a look at when we put this green over the top, a green that is on the other side of the colour wheel from pink. So they're colours that really have an interesting relationship. They can fight each other just like this, but also they can be the most beautiful, fresh combination if they're used in a delicate, sensitive manner. So you can see here a nice delicate green over the top. You see that crisp pink underneath. The colour in between is a kind of interesting mix of the two, but on the whole, it's worked quite nicely. Now, let's see what happens. Oh, I've got too much green there. See what happens if we put a nice delicate translucent green on top of this pink here. Ugh, yuck. That has, oh dear. So I've just filled it in as any other time I would. There was so much pink on there, it was so strong that even though it's dried, the pigment, there's just so much there that it's been drawn out when the moment it got touched with a little bit of water. So that's not worked very well at all. So trying to do a translucent layer on top of a really concentrated bit of watercolour paint doesn't work so well. However, what can work quite well is painting in concentrated paint over the top of concentrated paint. So you can see we've really gone darker and darker here, and you've started to really limit your options of where you could go for another layer. So just really, really be mindful when you are starting to build up layers of colour to really start nice and light. Whereas if you start really heavy, you haven't really got anywhere to go. So let's just try one or two more. So let's try some concentrated pink over the green. I think we could get even more colour on there. This is experimental, so there we go. And with a fairly solid colour of pink, the colour in between on the overlap is still fairly much the pink that was painted on. Let's try the pink over the green. Yet again, that green has been drawn out into the pink. It's not a very happy sort of friendship there, but what is interesting is if I just used my clean wet brush and painted a circle over the top of that, of course that paint would come out and layer up, and you see, even though it's dry, watercolour is just so responsive to water that it sort of wakes it up again, and again it's just not the happiest of mixes. So the positive good practices of layering are start with nice light layers to start with, and translucent as well if that's what you're going for, but also make sure they are bone dry before you start painting over the top. If you've already gone concentrated, then you'll need to go concentrated on top, and when I say concentrate I mean thick opaque paint. So that's concentrated opaque, that's translucent and dilute. But have some fun with it. And I've looked over here again, and to be honest, I'd pop that on my wall. I really, really like that. A bit of raspberry ripple in there. Anyway, that is a little look at more colouring of layering and blending. Now the last thing we need to do is have a look at our blends once again. Now peeling off the washi tape is super satisfying, but it doesn't always go how you want it. Sometimes, however well you have sort of used a really low tack washi tape, sometimes it does pull off the paper with it if, for example, a little bit of water has got under the page, or it might just be a bit strong. So you can always use that washi tape, either pop it on your clothes and peel it away a few times, it just reduces the tack down, or just be really, really slow and gentle with pulling it up off the page. Okay, let's see, have we got a full house? Yay, look at that. So you can see here, we've got a really nice smooth blend of the two here. We allowed the area in which the two colours were mixing to become really translucent and dilute. We did not try putting the two very strong opaque versions of the colour together, because you saw on those circles up there that does not go too well. Okay, let's see if we can do full house. Ah, look at that. And so the other thing to note is that even though it's very pale, we've got a lovely delicate blush pink right at the bottom here. So two beautiful gradient washes. And that is us all done for the basic steps of watercolour for beginners. So join me next time and we're going to start on some projects. It's going to be exciting. So if you've liked what you've seen so far, don't forget to hit the like button. I love getting your comments, I really do. I got a bit emotional last time. So tell me how you are getting on in those comments below. And of course, if you haven't already, hit subscribe. Right, I'll see you next time.